Now that I figured out what happened to me, how they hurt me, and why I've had emotional pain my whole life, why I've had a hard time on so many different levels, and why I felt like I was just existing. When you have trauma buried in your subconscious and you don't remember it, what it was when you aren't allowed to remember what happened to you. And that's what happens with traumatic memories over time. I mean, when something terrible happens, it gets scattered somewhere in the corners of your mind.
Hello, dear friends of the truth. This is going to be a longer video, not just about the death of David Wilcock, but you'll also hear my theory about synchronicity for the first time, a theory I actually wanted to save for later. But to honor David, I'm going to share it now, because that's something I wanted to discuss with him. And yes, I have a special connection to him, even though I never actually met him. Some of you may have already seen it in the accompanying text. On YouTube, you can't really get a look at it. The accompanying text, or rather the link. People don't really check it, so I don't have one there. But on Telegram and on X, I do. There, you'll already know a bit more about what this is about. I'm going to share some pretty out there theories, but I think he would have liked that too. At the beginning, you already saw a trailer, or actually before the trailer, you saw something that points in the same direction as my theory. At first, you'll have to listen to a quick rant from me, but please stick around. It'll definitely be worth it. I'm going to share things I've never talked about before. And I would call these absolutely unbelievable experiences. I actually wanted to save these for my next book, but yeah, I'm going to share them in this video. That's why I specifically requested that my wife arrange all the equipment here so that I'm constantly being recorded with a camera now. In the last videos, she was always busy, so I did it myself. All right. First, a quick rant. You'll see the topic in a moment. So a special shout out, I hope she's watching this time, to Celine1234. She always defends me and left a particularly nice comment here because my last video, well, the one before last, I didn't even upload the last one for this very reason, had an AI voice. And as she so nicely puts it here, I've explained this 1,000 times already, and I'll explain it again now. This is an extra service. This is an English video. I can't record every video in both English and German. That's double the work. And if you record in one language first and then the other, you don't even remember what you said anymore. So I record some videos in English and some in German. For example, I cover international, interesting topics in English. For instance, in this case, this is about the video. Donald Trump? I've already talked about this many times in German, about Solomon's Temple. There was some new information in it, namely that in the Talmud, Solomon's temple is built with the help of demons. That was new information. But because it is one new piece of information, I didn't want to record it in German, so I did it in English instead. But you can watch it on my channel, Oliver Janich International, in English with German subtitles. Oliver Janich, Investor. It's just an extra service for those. I pay money so that I can also provide it for you on YouTube, even with a German AI voice. But I won't be doing that anymore. I just talked to my partner here at the resort. He said he also finds the voice awful. Then I told him, but did you know that people want to unsubscribe from me because of it? He just shook his head. And those were actually the threats from people. Yeah, okay. That is creepy, that's fine, but there are people who say if this keeps up, you won't have to edit anything anymore because eventually all the subscribers will be gone. The AI is creepy and so on, so some people are threatening to leave the channel here. Look, random AI videos are being shut down. They don't deserve clicks, even if they're interesting. So what's the alternative? Watch the video on Olympionic International instead, or on X in English, or on Telegram. And for the 100th time, you'll find most of the information on Telegram. I don't post most things on X because if I did, it would mess up the timeline. On YouTube, you can't talk about every single piece of news. So if you're not on Telegram, you basically don't know anything anyway. Right now, since this actually costs me money, I don't have any credits left to do it. But I'll keep trying to upload it with the German AI voice for my Telegram people, MYX people, because that's just an extra service. And now someone can talk about unsubscribing from something they don't even have to watch? That's beyond me. But in this case, I'm yielding to the market. Why am I yielding to the market? Because I want my stuff to spread. And I'll explain it one more time. I'm not getting rich from this. Right now, I'm selling one book a day. What matters to me is that the international world also learns about these insights, especially what's in my book, but not so I can get rich, but because it concerns everyone. I'm not even saying this in a video so I can spread it elsewhere, but y'all know what the topic of my book is. And for that, of course, I have to make videos in English. No one would ever think to check it out otherwise. And it's no use making just one video about the topic. It'll be forgotten again by tomorrow. People need to buy the book so they have it in their hands and can look things up again whenever they want. But not so I can get rich, but so as many people as possible can find out about it. I'm doing my work to educate people. For example, on YouTube, I've been demonetized. I've made videos on YouTube for 10 years without earning a single cent. My goal is to educate as many people as possible. And karma-wise, if you say you're unsubscribing now because I'm German and you want to hear everything in German, that's really bad for your karma, because then you don't want other people to be informed too. You're saying, no, he only needs to educate me. He needs to educate me in German. Do you really think you'll have any chance in the world to come with that attitude, with that mindset? Or does everyone come into this world with bad karma? That means you have to do a little more good than bad. And unsubscribing from someone because they're offering a service they pay for, that's not good for your karma. That was my rant. But now, so I already made an English video about David Wilcock, but I just didn't upload it. That's exactly why you'll find it in the places where I said it would be. But now I'm making a detailed video because he deserves it, and I hope I won't get so emotional. I had to stop the last video because I feel an emotional connection there. I'll explain why in a moment. And there are so many haters. I didn't even know that before. But I believe he meant well. He spread a lot of misinformation, but in my opinion, not on purpose. It's because others tricked him. But again, for those who haven't seen it, I'm going to show certain things again now. This is one of the things he said in his last video, one day before.
This belongs to him, and it is quite remarkable.
So he said, it's an exciting time to be alive and to be on Earth. Then he said, and I posted this below as well, he also said that you should never take your own life, but instead die a natural death. Yeah, maybe I'll show that too. That's why I specifically uploaded it here on X. Okay, this isn't the German version. Okay, the German version is also on X. Yeah, so he explained that you shouldn't take your own life. That's what he argues against, that someone would take their own life. So now I'm going to show you the thing I already posted on Telegram, which supports the official theory. He left a farewell message. So he wrote a letter to a lawyer on the 18th. Supposedly, that's his friend Jude. I keep saying supposedly because I don't know him, but it's likely true. A school friend, calling almost daily, supposedly told him on the 18th about sending a letter to a lawyer we'll see shortly, and what he wrote in it.
I never met the lawyer. He never told me or disclosed to me what was in it. Sorry, I'm checking my mic battery because it died earlier, but we're okay now. He never disclosed the contents of the letter to me, but he was worried about the contents of the letter. And he was worried about what his lawyer might interpreted it as, or about his questioning of the worker. In any case, this is a short excerpt that his brother sent over to me via email. I have the whole letter, but I can't read the entire thing because part of it's private. But I will read through the statement that what his own brother Michael released to the public. Okay, here's the last section of the document. I'm going to start with that part because that's what he's talking about. This is from David. Please keep this document confidential to protect the names. The situations described, except for parts of the last paragraph on page 1, if appropriate. I hope this marks the way forward. In the event that I was lost and then I had your pleasure, I feel that I did the best I could in a very difficult situation. And then he writes this, and this is David Wilcock on Thursday, April 18th, 2026. And this is the part he wants all of you to hear as his family, his audience. I forgive all of you very deeply. If something like an accident happens, thank you for loving me. I feel that I did the best I could. My life has been destroyed by difficulties, pain, and illness. I have now almost completely run out of money as well. I really did my absolute best to keep going for as long as I possibly could. To my family, friends, and all my extended family of supporters, I want you to know how much I love you and how forgiving I am if something happens to me. I know that injuries are possible in my weakened state.
So, you heard it yourself. So he's basically writing a farewell, people, just in case something happens to him. At this point, you could say he feels threatened, and that's why something could happen, or maybe because he might take his own life. But in any case, it definitely sounds like a farewell letter. It was extremely important to me that you hear every single detail of that in its entirety. I'll review everything once more later. I really hope I don't forget anything in my summary. That's also very interesting, because right in the middle of his show, someone told him that his co-author had also died.
Some very interesting and remarkable things are unfolding right now, and that's a good thing. Oh my gosh, that's sad to hear. Winfrey just passed away, right, Butterfly Wayne? That's so strange because last night I was lying in bed thinking, wouldn't it be sad if Winfrey passed away? He's the guy who wrote the book, The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, with me.
One of his co-authors, I also saw that in German somewhere on X. Oh, that's the original. Yeah. I think I already posted it somewhere in German on my page too. So, because at first it was said, well, Grog told me, yeah, that only came up after he died, that his friend had also died before. But in the video, he mentions Winfrey, his co-author, passed away. So it's a huge coincidence he died just days before. It's unconfirmed, but that's secondary, because the coincidence exists. Yeah, and the fact that he even gets told that on the show. Or yeah, that was probably a message. So then we have, like I already mentioned in my English video, by now they've released the timeline. So just briefly, he supposedly called the police. I'll get to exactly what he said in a moment. Then they would have arrived at the scene. And then he supposedly shot himself in the head. I'll go into more detail about that. Okay, maybe right now. Of course, that looks pretty perfect. I mean, if you want to convince people that someone killed themselves, you do it exactly like this, so that supposedly someone saw it happen. Because, I mean, that almost never happens, that someone kills themselves in front of police officers. And the body cam footage still hasn't been released. They still haven't released it. And supposedly, it's because it would go against the public interest. Of course, that's exactly not against the public interest. And they also haven't released the 911 call he made. I just want to quickly show you that here. There are even special body cam video generators. That means if someone requests it now, they have 21 days to respond. So maybe we'll get the body cam footage at some point, but that also means they have 21 days to fake something. Here, let me show you a fake body cam recording, just so you can see. How realistic it already looks. This isn't even a professional recording. If the cabal really did kill him, you can bet they'll use the most advanced version of body cams. In theory, you can have AI analyze it again, but I already talked about that in another video. You run it through until other AIs say, nope, it's not AI. So you need time, which is a reason to delay the release. Then here, I've already talked about this too. Corey Good. He's one of those who basically got him into trouble. Years ago, I already said that. What he says just seems weird to me. By now, it's basically proven that he made it up. Yeah, I know. And is the communication really real? Part of it's real, part of it's dramatized. But 20 and back, that's my own creativity. That also has to do, among other things, with the copyright process. And then he says, that's my trademark, my copyright, because one invented it. Something like that. That's what he says. And some of it is made up, some of it really happened, and sometimes it's dramatized. That's how it is for most people. That's my creativity. That's just a short excerpt. There's a much longer video where he had to testify in court because of this copyright dispute. More or less, he admitted that he made things up. And that caused a lot of trouble for David Wilcock because he believed everything he said, and in my opinion, he's very trusting and very naive. That will still play a role, maybe in theory, later on. And that really hurt him, but he also had his own wrong predictions. So quite a lot of them from David Wilcock. That's why there's so much hate against him. I don't hate him at all. I actually find the books he wrote in the early years incredibly interesting. And then he just ended up believing the wrong people. That's why there's no reason to hate him. Unbelievable. But now he's telling the story that he killed himself because of online hate. That's got to be the dumbest excuse ever. All of us get online hate, and maybe he got more than most. But anyway, that's no reason to kill yourself. Of all people, he's the one with that story. He then said, yeah, go ahead. He put pressure on the police to investigate who was harassing him online. So I just commented underneath that he could save himself the trouble and instead put pressure on them to release the body cam footage. So here, I didn't want to forget this. 7 high-ranking Chinese scientists have also been murdered. And I'll come back to that at the end, why all these scientists are being murdered. So we've already covered that. So this is 30 minutes. To me, he seems like an honest guy here, his friend. He can't really handle the camera. I mean, the camera quality is bad, and so on, because he doesn't usually make YouTube videos. He only did it because people asked him to. As far as I know, now that I've recorded the video, the brother still hasn't made a statement. And the parents, except for that mysterious statement the police released, he wrote underneath it, the family did, and they say, yeah, no, it's fine. He was depressed and had mental problems. But you haven't heard anything from him personally. That's again. So, and now the wrong picture is up here because it skipped ahead. So they released 2 audio recordings, but those are just recordings of the police officers talking to each other. So one of the strange things is a friend of his who also says she talked to him on the phone every day during that week. And she says, this is just a funny picture here, even if it's not so nice for us to look at. Here, then he was in a great mood and really looking forward to the future. That's also the reason why most people don't believe it's real. Yeah, that's the longer part you saw at the beginning, where he talks about his abuse and where he talks about how he has multiple personalities, and that's going to play a role later. Maybe he doesn't mean it in the clinical sense. You'll have to judge that for yourselves, but he definitely says it, and that these were triggered by abuse. All right, and okay, so I don't forget to mention this. So I already talked about this in another video. It's that creepy video where, well, it's not real, but supposedly it was posted by Trump, even though it actually wasn't, where someone says a word in a demonic voice. And David Wilcock repeats that word 4 times, even though after the second time, one of his followers already warns him not to say it a third time. But he says it 2 more times. Yeah, I hope we don't forget about it later. So just really quickly about the Charlie Kirk parallels. Just like with Charlie Kirk, the people closest to him immediately go along with the official story. It's exactly the same here. All the people around him immediately go along with the official version. For example, Corey Woods says he was harassed online. Just like they say Charlie Kirk was killed by leftists. It's actually quite similar. The story being spread by the friends is remarkably consistent with the one about Charlie Kirk. Definitely see that as a clear parallel. Not the only one, but it's the only one I'm focusing on right now. I have it open again in another tab because I'm not logged in here. I'll just retell it. By the way, the 15 minutes here is pretty wild, too. The person who uploaded it is called Lady Lucifer. And here you can check for yourself if it's the right audio. Honestly, I didn't do it because there's no reason to think it's not the real audio. Yeah, nobody would bother to fake the Mimeo now, but you can check it here if you want. Apparently, the person downloaded it and then uploaded it again. So, yeah, here I've got this again in another one. He's also made videos before where he was really moved, emotional. Okay, I'm going to exit out of there now. That was actually just a reminder for myself. So, first, I want to go through all these things, but I'll speak freely for the rest of the video. That'll probably be more pleasant for you guys. But first, I need to go through all the facts so I don't forget anything important. So, okay, I'm not even there. I hope you can see this now. Ah, yeah, okay. This is really important. The three sentences he supposedly said, but you can't hear them. Like I said, the recordings are only from the police officers, how they talk to each other. The three sentences they did release. I need to get out of here. I have to go, so I need to leave. I'll be to the left of the house. I'll be on the left side of the house. I'm sorry for putting you through this. It's highly suspicious that they only released those three sentences. This is the longer video, where at the beginning he said that, where he talks about different personalities. It's 2 minutes long in total. Here it is now. You don't really have to listen to it, but here's a very brief analysis. So they're talking about how they're going there, and that he held the weapon to his head and shot himself. What I found a bit strange is that it sounds like there's a weapon lying next to him. So to his right, that's not strange. He was probably right-handed. And they say it's a rifle. So, a rifle. I already find that odd. And they talk about two cars parked there. But first of all, he either didn't have any or only had one. And yet they're talking about two cars. After that, I never heard anything about it again. So there are two things that seem a bit suspicious. You can listen to it yourselves. Here, from the lady with the lousy name. Yeah, we've already talked about her. Oh, that's right. I just pulled that up again. The final farewell message, which I have already shown you before. Let me see here. Okay, what exactly is he saying at the beginning there? Why is this coming up so early now? Oh, now we're getting into the hardcore theories. So, as you can see here, these scientists also said, I'm not going to kill myself, and so on. And here she's being attacked with energy weapons. Attacked. Very briefly. You can beam me through there and through, pour through there, and you can. Get a 3D image when I'm typing because this computer doesn't have a Wi-Fi card. You can't hack it, but maybe you can get a 3D image of me typing. Now you can see how her hand is being calmed. And she says that she was attacked with energy weapons there. That'll play a role in my theory later on. My goodness, I don't forget any of this. Yeah, so here. Weird. That's what I wanted in the end. Oh, right. Yeah. Here, I pinned it again, the Sultana. So I had two different things open. Okay, I've saved that for last. So I wouldn't forget it. Okay, just real quick here. So I really have to come back to that, to the specific timeline that is fixed. So now I've told you all the facts, and I hope I don't forget any of them now. So at first glance, of course, it really does look like he killed himself because so we have eyewitnesses who actually saw it happen, and we also have the specific written letter to the lawyer. But of course, there's still several other possibilities. It's suspicious those two things aren't public. Now we have plenty of time to tamper with them. Of course, I asked if that's normal. Yeah, so it can actually take longer with these personal recordings of his because he has personal rights and he can't object himself. You have to talk to the family about it. So it's not unusual, and police calls can be released immediately. But her immediate explanation about the body cams saying there's no public interest already seems suspicious. So the body cam, I think they should have released it by now. They definitely could have made the decision to do so. They could have chosen to release it. Now, of course, we don't know if they're tampering with it in the meantime. Another possible theory is that he was forced. That's why it would be so interesting to see the footage that they told someone, kidnapped someone, and said, kill yourself, or we'll kill the person. That's one possibility. But for that, we need to see if he's actually talking to someone or not. If it really happened that way, it's not necessarily that likely. Okay, then let's move on to the MK Ultra theory. I'll probably put that in the title now. So he was abused as a child, and he himself says that he has multiple personalities. Whether he actually means that in a clinical sense isn't 100% certain, but it definitely sounds like it. You heard it yourself. And he said that you split off when you experience something traumatic. And splitting off, that's dissociation. So it's called dissociative identity disorder now. But back then it was called multiple personality disorder. One distinct possibility is that they did MK Ultra on him and that he's completely programmable. As far as I know, he himself hasn't actually said anything at all about that. He tends to say that he was just abused, but and that's why it was traumatic, what he experienced. I don't think he's ever talked about being specifically programmed, but it's also possible that part of him has been erased. But if he really was programmed, there's always a personality that's suicidal. Marcel Poitier has explained that so many times, or he explains it in books, and it makes sense that if there's a personality that can be triggered so that the person kills themselves if they reveal too much. A trigger like that could have been set, but it is also entirely possible to just put so much intense pressure on him that he eventually switches over to that suicidal personality. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a password. They've been watching him for decades. That's obvious. That means he himself even talks publicly about having modern personalities. So you really just have to find a pressure point where that personality comes out. So if you put him under extreme stress, and that's exactly what we heard, that this week he said it was a stressful week. So, and this theory would also fit with the fact that on the 18th, he wrote that letter to the lawyer. Because it could be that he's been under pressure the whole time. And maybe they've been trying all along to trigger that personality. And he says, oh, if I can't stop it, maybe I'll die. I can't avoid it. And that's why I'm already writing this to the lawyer. That would be one possibility. Or the whole thing is fake with the letter to the lawyer. I actually think this guy's honest, this friend of his. But it's also possible that the lawyer's letter said something else. That's also a theoretical possibility. But in any case, even if he pulled the trigger himself, even if he took the weapon into his own hands, it would still be murder if they drove him to it, one way or another. That's probably why it'll end up being a headline at some point. The murder of David Wilcock. I'll explain in a moment why I don't believe he really killed himself voluntarily. And that would be a highly theoretical and strategic approach to put him under so much pressure that he eventually becomes triggered. There is a remarkably wide variety of different opinions regarding this specific matter. I've already looked around to see how the video affects people. I watched the entire 3.5 hours. To me, he doesn't seem depressed at all. Some people say he does, that he seems so empty, so go and watch it yourselves. He's in a great mood, cracking all his jokes, telling people, don't kill yourselves. It's the most exciting time to be alive. And you have to imagine, he's been waiting his whole life for UFOs to finally have to show up. He's predicted it many times before, but it never happened. But right now, it is happening. We are definitely going to see some kind of release soon, and that is 100% certain. Of course, it will also likely be a limited hangout, but at the very least, it would bring a huge amount of attention to the topic. It is basically the highlight of his entire life so far, if it is finally and officially announced that UFOs really exist. And now, they are saying he killed himself. So now let us talk about the motive, which is extraordinarily suspicious. Supposedly, he told the police he had financial problems. Huh? I mean, who calls the police and says, I have financial problems? to the police, especially about tax problems. That's basically calling the state and saying, I have problems with you. That's just totally ridiculous. Sure, now they'll probably, well, the other side will say, yeah, he was just completely confused and said all sorts of things. I'd like to see that first, but it's even easier to fake audio than to fake videos. Why are they giving us these 3 sentences that sound like he was calling for help? He says, I have to go. I have to leave the house. That sounds like he suspects someone is in the house. So either he suspects that someone is in the house, or from his perspective, a demon is chasing him. In any case, he wants to get out of the house. And then he also says, I'm to the left of the house. You'll find me to the left of the house. That's something you say when you want help. You say, hello, police are coming. I have to leave the house, but I'm to the left of the house. But you say you go out the left side of the house so you can watch me kill myself. That's just completely insane. So he probably called for help and was then possibly forced to do it. Or there is talk of 2 shots being fired. In one audio recording, it says, well, yeah, it seems apparently he first fired a test shot himself, just to check if it worked, according to the other audio we heard. In some account I read, they said they didn't know about the first shot. Where did it come from? That's interesting too. Yeah. Maybe he was just standing there with the weapon and it went off. And the part about him holding it up to himself isn't true. For example, it is also possible that if the whole thing is fabricated, but he actually was there at the location somewhere, then maybe they're only faking the part where he held the gun to his temple. So there are just too many possibilities. But basically, I think that personally, this shooting looks quite credible. And when you listen to those police audio recordings, it does sound kind of believable. They're talking there. Yeah, there's a man. Just like those typical police calls, they talk to each other completely emotionlessly. They deal with this hundreds of times a year. But theoretically, you only need 1 or 2 police officers who are in on it. Nevertheless, at the same time, it really doesn't look like that at all. Or it is actually quite a bit more, how should I put it? It could very well have unfolded exactly in that specific manner. You have these 2 different recordings and they both tell the same story. So you can't rule it out, but the motive, I just don't see it at all. So again, about the financial problem, I've already talked about this in another video. The American government gives you enough to live on. I haven't checked it myself. I just asked Grok, but it must be enough in this case because you can see it with Alex Jones too. He's bankrupt and still doing shows. So according to what Grok said, since he apparently lived in Colorado, they let you keep a house worth $250,000, a car worth $10,000 to $15,000, and a few $1,000s a month. Just in this stream alone, in his last stream, so before it became public, he made $2,800 from super chats. Someone who their whole life has devoted themselves to the idea that material things aren't important, but rather the spiritual. That's his philosophy. Is he then supposed to kill himself over money? And he had friends, for example, this Jude. And I also know, well, I don't really know how close he was with his parents. I don't remember exactly how it was with the abuse story, how he was somehow at fault there, but his brother. So he did have people around him. I mean, I've said this many times, it's always about this fear of social decline. If you have a friend you can stay with, you don't have to be afraid of anything. He'll pay for your food too, just like I've done with a buddy of mine before. Probably many of you have as well. You won't die just because you run out of money as long as you have friends. And obviously, you don't have to go to jail in America. You just have to try to pay it off. But you don't go to jail because of it. And before you go to jail, you can still run away. Actually, that is probably the least of your problems if you are living in America. You simply have to cross the border into Mexico going in the other direction. So as for those financial reasons, well, she has definitely had those the entire time. He was absolutely beyond excited, genuinely and incredibly thrilled that, at long last, the ascension is coming, ascension and awakening and so on. So just very briefly, for those who have followed more closely, he already predicted back in 2012, here's a bit of a story, he already predicted in 2012 that something would happen, but nothing happened. So nothing ever happened. And he was on Q's side and still, even in that video, talked about the alliance. He still believes there's an alliance that wants to save us, and he still believes he still does. Yeah. So what was I getting at with this? Yeah, in any case, there's no reason to kill yourself if you think it's all about to start now. With the disclosure, even during the Iran war, he said, yeah, maybe there's something else behind it. So he could be one of those people who still think there's a plan. That doesn't really suggest that he'd kill himself if he thinks there are planners. So, but it also shows that yeah, I actually really enjoyed reading his book. The source field investigation, which he wrote, was, in my opinion, very good. But even in that work, not all the sources he used were consistently reliable or equally solid. So he performed an absolutely outstanding task and uncovered a vast amount of information. But I truly learned an incredible amount of information during the time I was reading his work. But then you just keep growing and developing as an individual. However, he has simply been an exceptionally significant and influential figure in the disclosure of the UFO scene. So I think now I will tell you all about the personal connection that I have with him. And specifically, I want to talk about synchronicity. And if you don't know what that is, you can look it up. You'll see in a moment what synchronicity is. And I find it absolutely incredible. So many, many years ago, I actually know pretty much exactly when, because it was back on December 23rd in the year 2011. And I remember that specific date so clearly because on that very day, we spent a long time talking about what might happen on December 23rd, 2012. I was sitting together with a group of dedicated truthers, which included the prominent editor-in-chief of a major business magazine. He was a very well-known and highly respected truther in the community. There was another person, I'm not completely sure now, and a journalist as well as a published author. And yes, he then boldly claimed that he had actually filmed UFOs in Roswell, New Mexico, and he wanted to release this footage to the public as a documentary. He never did it. And this one well-known truther, he doesn't believe in the UFO topic at all. He thinks they don't exist. And he's the most stubborn truther in Germany, which means he probably still believes they don't exist. That's why he left, and the other one left too. And I found that super interesting and stayed with him and his assistant. That was in a Munich place that already closed at 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it definitely closed at 1. It was a restaurant, but the owner was a friend of his, the restaurant owner, and he let us stay there. We sat there until 6 in the morning. And yes, I actually plan to tell this whole story in my next book, but now, in honor of David, I'm telling it to you right now. And it was honestly quite creepy. I mean, it was really kind of creepy in a way. So one specific thing that happened during our long conversation was that he told me, and I honestly don't even remember what his name was at this point, but if he happens to be watching this right now, he can certainly speak up and say who he is. For example, he told me quite a bit. Well, we talked about many things. We specifically talked about David Wilcock's various theories and ideas, and it just went on from there. Talking about reptilians and other similar kinds of topics. And he said, yes, I think he said they exist. And then, as a specific example, he told me something that had occurred to him personally several times. Madeleine Albright just waved him up on stage and then chatted casually with him. And so chatted with him, and he says he doesn't even know her. And then I say to him, well, maybe you're actually a reptilian too. And that's exactly why she recognized you so quickly. And right then he spits. He had just been drinking or eating something. He spits everything right out of his mouth, turns bright red, swallows hard, and says, you know, you might really be onto something there. And this was at 5 in the morning, so sometime during the night. And at that point, I already started to feel a bit uneasy about it all. But we had, I don't remember if it was before or after that, we had talked about the meaning of the number 11. That brings me to my personal story. I see 1,111 everywhere. There are different theories about it. But for example, I have a very special connection to that number because when I was 11, I decided that 11 was my favorite number. So I have the double 11. And that's why I became interested in it. And I always see the number 11 in certain life situations and so on. And I'll explain to you, I'll tell you in a moment in which situation. And that's exactly what David Wilcock talked about as well. And he explains that it's a deep and mysterious connection. Wait, no, or I'm trying to recall exactly what his theory was again. A connection to the spiritual or something like that. And he also once mentioned that synchronicities, like these meaningful signs, so to speak, could also be messages from your future self to yourself. That is just one of the many theories. In any case, that's one of his main topics, synchronicity and the number 11, and mine as well. Well, not publicly yet, but for a long time already. And then next, and this guy, so I asked him, I don't remember how we got onto the topic. We were talking about the number 11, and then he tells me a story that he was in the country of Japan, and standing directly in front of politicians, influential business people, and famous celebrities, and so on, kind of like, he presented himself as if he were a kind of mysterious magician. And for them, he did a sort of seance, and he supposedly fell into a trance there, and then he woke up again, and so on. And anyway, in that context, he told me that I'm not sure if he learned it there or what 1111 means. Based on the detailed explanations he provided earlier, it's a mysterious portal that leads directly into various other unknown dimensions, which is why he believes it is so significant for our understanding of the universe. He tells me all about this, and then I tell him quite a few interesting stories of my own. So I really think I've already told you guys about this before. I've already mentioned that I once took part in a very specific scientific experiment back when I was at university, where you actually had to try and guess a series of different numbers. Like, what's the next number? And I was in the top 2%. So 98% of people did worse than I did. Then I've also already told you that I did remote viewing with very good results, and so on. I told him all of that. And then I told him, yeah, but I'm really bad at meditating. And then he said to me, no, you do not even need to do that anymore. You know where the keyhole is and where the key is. You just have to rotate the handle or to open the gate. Yes, to open the gate. Okay, the evening comes to an end. There were still a lot of interesting things included. But anyway, the very next day when I check, I'm sitting there at my computer, and I happen to watch a fascinating David Wilcock video where he talks in great detail about the complex structure of the entire universe, explaining exactly how a donut shape is constructed and so on. And then all of a sudden, the whole entire computer system just completely shuts down. I was just lying there on the bed, and instinctively, so my TV was already on, but it was muted, I decided to turn the sound back on. I don't even really know why I did it. I mean, why does a thought like that even come to me? Oh, and right at that exact moment, the voice says, on the TV screen, it says, Camelot opens the gate. Camelot, that's what I used to call myself on the internet at the very beginning when I was anonymous and outspoken on some social network. That account probably still exists somewhere. So I am Camelot. And he says, Camelot opens the gate. After he tells me how I can open the gate, suddenly the computer starts up again. All the windows are closed. And only the video with David Wilcock is still running. That's a synchronicity. So I don't believe in coincidence. And now, once again, about the number 11. So here is just one experience. My favorite time was sitting down for a meal with my architect and recounting the details of the exact story I just told you. And then we began to discuss the significance of the number 11 and so on. And we're settling the bill. We ordered a variety of different items, hamburgers, coffee, and so on. He ended up ordering something different than I did. I'm paying, I'm invited, and the price is exactly right. 11 euros and 11 cents. 11, 11. And it always occurs twice or often twice. In this case, everything revolves around the double 11. The probability of that happening is, we previously discussed 11.11, and then that's exactly the price. Then I go to the airport and I find myself standing in line somewhere. And suddenly I see, oh, it's line 11, but there were 3 lines. I told myself, okay, did I subconsciously choose that one? But then I said, if I also get seat 11 now, I'm going to freak out. I was not assigned to seat 11, but the plane departed anyway. From gate 11, but it wasn't like the gates had the same names as the lines. The lines were 11, 12, 13, and the plane departed from gate 11. So I had 1111 with the price and 1111 at the airport after I had just talked to someone about 1111. That's extremely unlikely. So, and now I would like to get to what just happened yesterday, or what happened yesterday. I was just sitting here watching this video by Candace Owens, and then the guy in that interview suddenly starts talking about how he and his wife always talked about the sequence 1111, and they truly believed those digits were their special angel numbers. I tell my wife about it. And I say, look, because we also always, well, my wife and I have so many synchronicities, I could write a book about them, but among others, there's the 1111. And I show her that. And then she says to me, should I tell you, I actually wanted to give you something as a gift? I say, no, don't tell me. I say, okay, but of course I got curious. And I said, no, tell me what you wanted to give me. I'll show you now. I have a ring with the specific number 1111 on it. And then in the evening, I'm going to make my short daily English video all about it. And later in the evening, I will go to the bathroom. One more time before bed. Right before I head off to bed, I walk right past my wife's phone when the screen suddenly lights up, and what do I see there? The 1111. That can't be a coincidence. I have a theory about this. Now I have to carefully explain to you exactly what I'm thinking. But first I need to explain it to you. What I think, what I write in my book, The Open Secret, about what these synchronizations are. So that was just an example, that things happen at the same time that actually have no causal connection. No visible causal connection here on Earth. My theory, I don't know if anyone else has already come up with it. I haven't concerned myself with what others think about it. This is my personal theory about what synchronicities are. Picture in your mind a vast, flat, two-dimensional world, much like an infinite sheet of paper stretching out forever. In this unique realm, only two-dimensional beings exist, spending their entire lives wandering across the surface. Now imagine if an entity from the third dimension reaches down and pokes through this paper using a pair of compasses. To the inhabitants of that flat world, two distinct holes would suddenly appear at two separate points on the surface. Or if it stays stuck in there, there will suddenly be metal there. The living creatures on this two-dimensional paper cannot possibly comprehend why suddenly two holes appear at the same time. But from the perspective of the third dimension, the explanation becomes perfectly clear. What this essentially means is, I firmly believe that these synchronicities are profound connections to higher dimensions. So something happens in higher dimensions that has effects on the second one. And in this case, we are in the third dimension. If you take away the concept of time, which is also another physical dimension, then maybe something could manifest here from the fifth dimension. How should I put it? Something comes from the fifth dimension into the third. And those are the synchronicities that appear to us as coincidences. This is my great theory of synchronicity. And for example, it could be the case that I wrote to him, to David Wilcock. I think the last time was back in December. In December, I also wrote once again to Erich von Däniken because I really wanted to have a formal interview, and I sent him a research paper of mine. And I reached out to David Wilcock as well. David Icke too, but none of them are responding. Erich von Däniken was already suffering from a very serious illness. I actually wanted to talk about it when he eventually departed from this world. Then I wanted to reach out and send messages to various individuals, international people who had offered their sincere condolences to him and say, yes, I wanted the paper that you sent him, the last paper he might have received. And then my wife said to me, no, then people would think you're trying to profit from his death. So I left it alone. But now it's been a few months, so hopefully I can talk about it now. And now I'm also going to tell my story with David Wilcock. Of course, all of this is thematically connected. Readers of my book already know Erich von Däniken, David Wilcock, and soon I'll say more about that too. And for example, what he could be, it is like the fundamental way that the entire universe actually works. Or perhaps when you die, you might immediately gain full and immediate access to the collective stream of all consciousness. And it could be, for example, that he thinks, and then a vivid movie of his entire life begins to play back in sequence and so on. Of course, that's just a relatively small thing, but in the grander scheme of things, time doesn't really matter at all. It's not like I never replied to him. Now you send him the 11. So, for example, 3 times because he's in a higher dimension. And he, of course, I'm unimportant. He knows thousands, millions of people. But when you're in that state of consciousness, then it basically works automatically. Maybe he also sent signs to others to whom he still wanted to apologize. I mean, it's not such a big sin not to reply to me, but do you truly understand what I mean? It could be, for example, a specific case where from the much higher dimension, suddenly, I've never actually replied to him, so he sends me these mysterious signs, for example. But in any case, it's a synchronicity. How can what I just described be possible? If you know a bit about probability, the likelihood of that happening is practically zero. So now we come to another theory of mine. That's why I showed the thing with the timelines. What if all these brilliant scientists are being targeted and killed to alter our entire timeline? I know, that probably sounds totally crazy and far-fetched compared to the usual scientific topics I deal with, but it is a possibility we must consider. So supposedly there's this Project Looking Glass. There aren't really any solid proofs for it, but supposedly they can look into the future with it. We're able to, so Dan Burrish, the one who claims that, yes, also someone who died, well, who was obviously murdered, also a UFO researcher. And with that, they could supposedly see different timelines and then simulate what would happen if this or that were done and so on, regardless of whether this actually exists or not. Another theory, of course, would be that people from the future are killing people now in order to change the timeline. Yes, of course, that sounds like science fiction, I know. Naturally, there's the paradox, the time paradox, like if you kill your own father and so on. There are various theories about that, such as it creating a new universe and so on. That is not even what I'm trying to get at. Theoretically, all of that could be entirely possible too. But it is already more than enough if an artificial intelligence predicts that the specific people they are killing right now would have eventually led humanity into a glorious golden future. So, for example, they are now actively pushing the alien agenda forward, meaning that all of this is finally being made public. Of course, everyone has to wonder what kind of advanced technology do they actually have. So, anti-gravity and zero-point energy, it is all deeply connected. A completely new form of energy generation, in other words. And we've been researching this because that's the question that comes up when they actually tell us. And that's going to happen in the next year or two. Now it's really happening. Luna keeps talking about it all the time. So something is about to happen now. And then they'll have to explain to us why we don't have this energy. And maybe according to their predictions, or because they can really look into the future, maybe they're eliminating exactly the people who would have been crucial for freeing humanity with these new technologies. And David Wilcock certainly would have been a perfectly suited candidate for that because wait a second, what exactly is that right there? Well, that's the end of it too. He would, of course, have been a good candidate for that. So if, for example, they are obviously planning a fake alien attack, as I've said many times, Werner von Braun's assistant always says that Werner von Braun told her about it. Fake alien attack, world government. And because in the report from Iron Mountain, 2 alternatives were given, either a global environmental catastrophe, then people would accept a world government, or an alien attack. I wrote about this 15 years ago. So that means a fake alien attack may be imminent. And if someone like David Wilcock, who still believes that Trump is the good guy, for example, if he stands up and says, no, this is all fake, then of course no one will believe him. And although he has fallen a bit out of favor because of his false predictions and so on, but if he now, just as an example, he was for a while the most well-known UFO researcher, he might not be that well-known in Germany, but his books have also been published in Germany. And so for people like me, he is still the most familiar one, the one I know best. All the others, there are so many different ones. Stephen Greer, maybe, as I also wrote, he has also been speaking out very often lately. He is performing a limited hangout, but that's not the point right now. But if someone like that were to say, no, that is entirely fake, then people would actually listen to him, again, more than they have recently. So maybe they're getting rid of all these people, and especially David Wilcock. so as not to end up on the timeline where humanity frees itself. I know that sounds a bit too esoteric and abstract or whatever. But UFOs are a fact, different dimensions are a fact. All right, I guess I can reveal it. I believe that there are 11 dimensions, namely because of the significance of the number 11. Some say there are 11 and some say there are 12. Because of another experience, which I don't want to talk about now, a personal experience, I believe there are 11. But that means these dimensions, these 11, exist exactly where I'm sitting right now and exactly where you're sitting right now. There are still 11 dimensions existing there, and there's no reason to assume that they're uninhabited. Absolutely none. On the contrary. Higher dimensions are likely to have even more highly developed life than lower dimensions. Maybe that's part of it. Let's leave it at that for now. So, back to the development. There are plenty of motives to kill him. There's no motive for why he would have killed himself. Of course, you can always argue that he became depressed the very next morning. Sure, when you get caught in a downward spiral of depression, anything can happen. But the sequence of events, honestly, it just doesn't add up. Hello, dear police. I have financial problems. Come by. I'm standing to the left of the house. And then he shoots himself. I haven't really explained that yet either. So either, let's assume he wanted to kill himself and planned it before the 19th, before his last broadcast. Then you could say, okay, he spread the message that people shouldn't kill themselves so that people wouldn't believe he killed himself. But in that case, he doesn't stand in front of the police and shoot himself in front of them just so everyone believes it. So if you assume that he had already planned it during the broadcast and deliberately talked about how people shouldn't kill themselves, then his later behavior doesn't fit with that. And there are also these radiation weapons. There is technology, I can't prove it here, but you can find out for yourselves. There is technology that makes you hear voices. That's MK Ultra and so on. Maybe he was also irradiated, and a voice told him do this and do that. Or maybe he thought he was being pursued by demons, and that's why he ran out. But again, it makes sense that the police call if he was afraid of something. It doesn't make any sense to call the police if I want to kill myself. And then I even say, I'm to the left of the house. Why would you tell them that? You tell someone because you say, okay, I've left the house. They need to find me. So you say, I'm to the left of the house. I went out there so they can find him, but not so they can find him to shoot him. That makes absolutely no sense. So suicide usually happens in total solitude and alone. So this is a completely unusual sequence of events. Of course, unusual things do happen, but sorry, I don't buy it. And the manipulation could go even further, that this letter from the lawyer wasn't really from him at all. Yes, theoretically. Unfortunately, I just don't believe anything they're going to publish now, but I will definitely watch it. I'll keep following it. For me, it's kind of like what Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk are for others. I'll definitely keep following it because all of this is just too fishy. And really, I mean, I follow, as I said, I haven't watched him that often anymore then. But as I said, also, all this criticism of him is totally unfair because he always addressed it. I mean, he explained to me, yes, I know you think things are a certain way, but I just firmly believe it's like this. So he was actually quite a deeply sensitive person, you have to say, because for a large portion of the time, he was talking directly to his followers. And when someone was mean to him, you could really tell that it affected him somehow. But that's not a reason to take your own life. Anyway, what I mean is that he always responded when someone contradicted him, he would explain it. So, for example, with Trump, he said, yes, I know it looks like crap. He even said himself that it doesn't look good when he presents himself as Jesus. And then he just objectively stated that it doesn't look good, but somehow he still believes that things will turn out well. So, in terms of personality, I think, as I said, there are so many hate comments about him, but he really has his own story to tell, and he didn't force his story on anyone at all. He said, I believe that, yes. Everything he said about whistleblowers is real. Most of the stories in recent years have come from whistleblowers. And he said, yes, I just believe them. And I think that almost all of them were deep state people who told a lot of nonsense. Not everything, but a lot. That's mostly how it works in the UFO scene. I'd say 90% of the people there are probably fake, or at the very least 50%. I don't know. But in any case, because this is the most important topic of all, because with this technology, we could all be free. So suppressing this information means they send a truly massive and overwhelming number of disinformation agents into those spaces. Many have even seen David Wilcock himself as a disinformation agent. But I personally simply do not see it that way. I see now that he was deceived and that he was naive and he believed a lot of things that I simply don't believe. But I always think that he rather handled it honestly because he said so himself. He said, that's just what the whistleblower told me. And I believe him because he already told me other things that turned out to be true. That's more or less always the argument. That's fair, isn't it? But even if you don't happen to like him, I mean, how incredibly likely is it that something like that would really happen? Now, disclosure is happening. All the UFO people they're dropping like flies. I hope you're not listening to that nonsense. I don't know why. There's always some alarm going off here. They're dying like flies. And then a few days before him, his co-author dies, and now him. Of course, because of the anti-gravity. He did invest in that company, but nothing ever came of it. But at least he had the knowledge. And who knows what he definitely became more cautious. He talked about his work. So he had the knowledge and would have been an important voice if the fake aid. There are many reasons to kill someone like that. But there are financial problems. Oh, and then there were also health problems. Half the time, if you don't want to watch it, he's talking about how to eat healthy. So he actually wanted to go carnivore, but he said, yeah, but meat is so expensive and so on. But I wouldn't spend time talking about it for about an hour and a half about how I eat healthy. And then the next day I kill myself when I'm doing everything I can to stay healthy. That's just crazy. That reminds me of another historical event, but anyway, yeah. Sure, like I said, there are ups and downs with depression, but there isn't any event that, well, like I said, unless he was triggered, which is one of my theories, MK Ultra triggered, or as I said, influenced with directed energy weapons, influenced. I can imagine all of that. But as I mentioned before, because of issues with taxes, for someone who is so spiritual, that really doesn't matter at all. It's about living well. It's actually quite similar to what I also say, like the message of Jesus' teachings. I wouldn't kill myself because of financial problems, especially someone as well known as him. He never has financial problems. Like I said, he could just go abroad and then he could collect donations there. That's all there is to it. Nonsense. Financial problems, right? Sure, it is incredibly difficult if you have them, but that's not a justifiable reason to kill yourself. If I'm spiritual and firmly believe that I'll more or less go to hell if I kill myself. I've already talked about that in another video. That's why, as you can see, when I've already made an English video and then a German one, I don't remember anymore what I've already said. I think I haven't said this yet. I don't know of any spiritual teaching where it's considered good to kill yourself. It's too easy to just say, I see the result, someone took their life, so I assume they had mental problems. It's always the same game. How many times do people have to say, no, I'm not suicidal? And then they get killed. He last said it in 2022. Okay, you could say that's quite a while ago, but then he said it again directly the day before. Guys, don't kill yourselves. That's not good. The only way out is natural death. And the next day, he's supposed to have done it himself. So, as I said, I can't prove anything in this case. I hope you found it interesting what I told you about my life. My life is filled with meaningful synchronicities, and if you start to notice them, you will find that yours is as well. One of my theses is not just this combination, meaning the influence from the higher dimension. My thesis is that the whole universe is structured this way. So you see, now as you watch me, you are experiencing a synchronicity. You just don't notice it. You don't notice what is happening at the same time. For example, a synchronicity could be that right now, as you are watching this video, someone named Oliver is walking by where you are. But you don't realize it because you don't know that his name is Oliver. So one of my theses is that if you just knew everything, then everything would somehow run in sync. Do you understand what I mean? I hope this doesn't sound too esoteric for you. As I said in my next book, I'll go into this much more, but of course, I've already included quite a bit of it here as an open secret. Yes, so I find it extremely sad. A very important voice is simply missing. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. If I have forgotten something, I'll turn the video back on because I think it's clear now. So even if he shot himself, it was murder because he was driven to it. But what's proven is that's not even it, even though it all already sounds quite realistic. So I have to wrap it up here. I would appreciate it if you could write down your opinion for me, especially since I am constantly receiving suggestions from others, and that one specific thing I mentioned is something that I also read about somewhere else. Oh, right, yes, someone wrote that to me somewhere. I think I read it on X. This idea that maybe he was forced to kill himself because they didn't want to have someone else kill him. But we just have to see if he was still on the phone somewhere. But that's just another thought. I didn't have that one myself. It came from some X post after all. Unfortunately, I can't say who it was now. It was some English post. Crowdsourcing. So here, the more that different people think about something, the more creative ideas you will eventually get. I truly hope that absolutely no one unsubscribes from me now, just because of my passionate and slightly angry rant. Maybe I'll let people vote on Telecom. Perhaps I will let the viewers vote under the video. How could I possibly complain about getting a free translation of the video that I can also access completely for free in English and that I can also get for free with subtitles? How can I complain about that? I don't understand it. So, in this sense, this probably wasn't my last video about David Wilcock, but there probably won't be another one anytime soon unless there's some new development. But I think it will take a while until they eventually release more of the tapes. Maybe we'll discover something then. In any case, the man is missed. At least I miss him.